Is it? We're live. Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm Kevin.
And we are
the Signal Brothers. Hey, welcome everybody back to our next live podcast. Welcome here where we're going to talk about pardons. But before we get there, Jim.
Yes, Kevin.
The Ohio State Buckeyes win the national championship. What is up with that, man?
That is crazy. Well, see, the trick is we got to change the rules, and the committee have to change, because remember the last time they won it, they changed to a 14 actual playoff. They changed to a 12-team playoff, and we won that one too. So we just got to wait for the next rule change, I guess.
Awesome. Well, as much as I am not an Ohio State Buckeye fan, congratulations to you, and glad that you're enjoying the excitement.
Yeah, we like it when we have our turns. You've had your turns. I have my mom right now, so yeah.
Yeah, roll Tide. All righty. Hey, just reminding everybody about our rules, right? So as you do us a favor. Feel free to add questions in the chat. We do respond to questions in the chat, and we take them pretty. We may finish a thought, but we will definitely look at your questions and respond to them. So just remember our 5 rules here, right? We're not here to attack anybody. We're here to have a discussion and learn and grow, right? And there's going to be things, even Jim. There's things that Jim and I disagree on, right? We agree to disagree. Like I'm a Alabama Roll Tide. And he's yeah, there you go. But we don't agree on football, but we learn to agree that we don't agree on football, right? So it is what it is. So just keep that in mind as we go through. And if you have questions, put them in there. And hey, if you'd love to be a guest on the Signal Brothers, we'd love to have you. So on to today's subject, right? The presidential transition. Man, Jim, has a lot happened in the past week, or what?
It's like almost like a whole different world. So many things have happened so quickly and so unexpectedly. I mean, there's things that happened that I would never have thought. Have thought.
Yeah. I will say this though. It was nice to see all the former presidents at the inauguration, right? Doesn't matter what your party is. Doesn't matter if you like somebody or don't like somebody. It was good that they all came together and they were all there. Unlike the last inauguration, when somebody had his panties up in a wad and was a little angry and went home, right? He should have been there. Everybody was there for his. He should have been there for the last one in 2021. But it is what it is.
Well, he made up for it. He's there this time.
That's pretty funny. Hey, so a lot has happened, and we'll get into the pardons. We're going to talk about the pardons from both presidents, but we did want to talk about a few other things that have happened this week that are just, it's a lot. There's so much going on, and we're trying to keep up on. I don't think we can cover everything that happened in the past week. So first thing I want to talk about is, man, federal employees having to return to work, right? So I guess past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, right? There's been a lot of telework, and according to the president's executive order, hey, they need to get back in the office. There used to be ad hoc telework, and if you read the order, it's basically they need to be in there 5 days a week. But, he did offer in there that, employees that live 50 miles away have to find another office closer if possible. I don't think it's going to be possible for all of them. And he did leave exceptions to the agency directors. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Jim, what's your thought about the employees having to go back to work all the time?
Well, there's, I can see both sides. And I mean, I work IT, so we work from home. I'm a remote employee myself. I was hired as a remote employee, and I've been a remote employee for 9 years. When COVID, pretty much things went back to whatever you could call normal. We did the same thing. My company did the same thing, and it was pretty standard. Employees that live more than 50 miles away, you could find another office, or you could. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, you're public servants. You know what I mean? You're public servants. You're paid. You're paid to serve the public. You're paid, so you should be reachable. And in old-fashioned kind of way, you should be in the office 5 days a week. I could live with 3 days a week with them being there, but I do think there needs to be, again, there needs to be some visibility if you're going to be a government employee, if you're going to be a civil servant. There needs to be a visibility and accountability to that. So I can see both sides of the argument. I mean, I don't completely disagree with them, but 5 days, I don't think they need to do all 5.
Well, what's interesting is, I was a government employee for 20 years as a civil servant. And prior to COVID, right, my employees used to ask me about telework all the time. And I was dead set against telework, right? Because to me, telework was schluff off time, right? But obviously, COVID changed that dynamic quite a bit. And we learned to roll with it. And I think ad hoc telework is good, right? Like you said, 3 days a week or ad hoc as needed, right? I think that is the way to go. What I think is interesting is, I think back on the vaccine mandate, right? So I think this is going to be litigated in court. This return to work 5 days a week. I think this is going to go to the courts, right? And the courts are going to, this is going to get caught up in court. The government employees and the unions are going to fight this. And I think at the end of the day, it'll be just like the vaccine mandate, right? It's going to be pulled back, and it's going to be at the discretion of the organization. I think we're focused on performance metrics. You're right; they're public servants; they're accountable to the public. But I would say, if they're getting work done, if your work is performance based and you're getting your work done, does it matter if you're doing it from home or the office? What's your thoughts, Jim?
That's a good point, because we had the same argument with my company when they started bringing us back to the office. I'm like, I think you see more productivity in some people, because my commute to the office is an hour and a half each way, so that's 3 hours of my day on the road, plus the lunch hour and the 8 hours I'm there. I mean, that's literally half your day. So you're not going to want to put any extra in. But working from home, I'll log in on Sunday evenings and get something done and prepared for Monday morning. If I got something that spills over, I don't have to worry about staying at the office longer because I'm already here. I can have it running, go down and get something to eat, come back up and check on. I mean, there's going to be a loss of productivity for certain people. For others, yeah, they need to be constantly nudged and pushed and watched, and you figure out real quick who those people are and can make adjustments accordingly.
But I would argue that if you're not productive at home, you're probably not productive in the office either. It's probably obvious, right? And I think that's the root of what we're trying to get at, is getting rid of the people that are the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah,
right?
If you pay attention, you're going to see it real easy.
So that was pretty crazy. Now I just want to get into the border encounters, right? They've significantly dropped. And I don't want to talk about just under President Trump, because they did in the waning days of the Biden presidency. They also went down, right? Man. So there is an impact, right, to having a strong voice against people crossing the border illegally. And I don't want to get into the details of that, and it is what it is. But I'm married to a foreign national who's now a naturalized citizen, so I definitely understand the challenges of immigrating to this country, because trust me, my wife and I went through it, and it is no easy task to become a lawful permanent resident of this country. But I am glad to see that the number of people that are coming across the border illegally are taking place, right? I think it's really a good thing. And there are those that need political asylum, and we should accommodate them 100%. I just don't want that to be a broad swath. How about the fact that we were go ahead, Jim. I didn't even give you a chance to chime in on that.
I was just going to say that you're right. There are needs, that political asylum and everything, but kind of like we brought up last week on that whole thing. If you're letting in unchecked tens of thousands, those people that need it are going to be lost in that mix. And I understand you want to come here for a new beginning. We're all sons of immigrants. Unless we're Native American, we're descendants of immigrants. Period. My son-in-law, he immigrated from Mexico, and we went through talking with him about what he's going through to do all that stuff, and he's doing it illegally. And I get that it's a hassle, and I get that it's easier to hop the fence, so to speak. but it's also easier to walk into a store and steal a loaf of bread as opposed to pay $5 for it. It's just as wrong, you know. But the ones that need it are being swept under. You know, they're being swept over. They're being missed.
So we got a question from Ed. He says, how do you differentiate want and need of a political assignment? That's a great question, Ed.
It is.
I'm not the expert on that. And that's why we need to put people on the border that can deal with that, right? I agree with the wait in Mexico to validate that. But I don't have an answer to that question, Ed. I'm not an expert on how you define political asylum needs versus just a want.
Yeah, it
Great
does
question.
need.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it does need to be defined, and that's going to be, like Kevin said, people that have more knowledge about that than we do. But the need is there. The need is definitely there, and it's kind of a gray line. And it's just my opinion. It's kind of a gray line. There's a lot of people, you know, living in other countries that just deal with it. They shouldn't have to, but they do. So we're Ed's right. Where is that, you know, distinction? Where is that distinction? I want a political asylum because we are being tortured. We are being, so I want it. It's going to spill over into a need at that point. But, you know, it's just, there's, for lack of a better term, better men to decide on that than I, you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely not the expert on that, but it is a great question from Ed. You know, so, you know, one of the things is, you know, so they're going out and raids are happening across the U.S., right, to go after the violent criminals. I don't know, you know, in Newark, New Jersey, supposedly there was a raid and, you know, there was no warrant. And even an American citizen got wrapped up, had to prove that he was an American citizen. So while I am definitely for removing the violent illegal aliens from this country, the violent ones, right? That should be the focus. I'm definitely concerned if this is going on, right? And I don't know that this is the truth, right? They said they didn't have a warrant. Did they have a warrant? Did they really, you know, give that U.S. citizen a hard time? I don't know the details, but I am definitely for getting the violent ones, the ones that we know that have a violent background, right? Or have done a violent acts here in the U.S., right? That they should be out of here. Jim, what's your take on that?
They definitely need to be rounded up and sent back home. But I mean, at what level? Definitely violent. I mean, you get gang members and you got, you know, drug dealers. You got, I mean, and I'm sorry, I know I'm throwing drug dealers in with violent, but I mean that does have a serious negative effect, and it does, you know, progress into violence. You know, drug dealers resort to that all the time. But a blanket roundup, hey, you know, there's 100 guys gathered up right over here. Let's go grab all 100 of them. Yeah, it shouldn't be quite that blanket. It needs to be, okay, let's talk to you. But by the same token, you know, if you're approached by ICE or, you know, a police officer or sheriff's deputy, anybody, and he asks you a question, the moment you freak out, that pretty much tells me, you know what? Yeah, you need to be dealt with. But if you're like, no, I'm here legally, here's my this, here's my that, you know, this is my ID and everything, it's okay, we can go on about your business. You know, if you freak out and say, you know, you guys are evil and start running away, you can pretty much differentiate who's who, you know. But that kind of also falls, if you come to this country, or any country, if I were to go to another country, and an officer come up to me, because say I don't look like, you know, when we went to Bahamas, I don't look like a person that lives in the Bahamas. I understand that he would ask me something before he would ask the 20 people standing next to me. I get that. And it's kind of my responsibility being in their country to accept that and to deal with it. And then 9 times out of 10, it would end favorably and I'll go on with my business. We don't have that here. A lot of the stuff, you know, they built up these guys to be just evil, you know, fascists and Nazis, and they're just coming to get you regardless of you know, your stat. That's not the case. You know, it needs to be, we need to have something in place to, and again, better men than I to figure this part out, to differentiate between who's dangerous and who's not, instead of just rounding up everybody. But
Yeah, I'm definitely against to round up everybody. You know, the Fourth Amendment, right,
mhm,
which
mhm,
is, talks about illegal search and seizures, right? You can watch a
yeah,
whole bunch of videos. I don't care if you watch them on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, where people, people are out there filming in public and the police are trying to ID them. And, they go, and I'm not an expert on the Constitution and I'm not a lawyer. So I don't get into the details of that. But does a policeman have the right to ask for your ID? Right? If you're not committing a crime, do they have a right to ask for your ID? I don't know. Right. But that's the point about going and rounding folks up. We just can't go and round up people, right?
mhm,
Because we think they might be illegal. Right. The focus should be getting those people that we know that are here, that
mhm,
are violent, that are connected to drugs and crime and gangs, and get them out of here if they're not here legally. Right. Let's
mhm.
deal with the people here legally that are those laws, but we shouldn't be just doing blanket roundups, right?
No, and once
Just want
that
to go ahead, Jim.
I said once that kind of thing is under control or better under control, maybe we can streamline the immigration process so that the people that want or need to be here seeking asylum, or just wanting to migrate over for a better life, make the process a bit more streamlined and a bit more user friendly, if you will, so that we can get those people taken care of and into the system and into the country and into working jobs and into decent housing. You know, it would just serve everybody so much better.
Understood. And we could probably on a single podcast just talk about the immigration process and the
Oh yeah.
reforms that are needed. Let me tell you, like I said, my wife immigrated from Germany and back in the 90s. And if I spent time going through that process, and a lot of people I know, their spouses have gone through the process too. Well, it definitely was an easy thing to go through. How about, Jim, when we flew plane returning immigrants back to Mexico, and Mexico refused to let the plane land? What's your take on that, Jim?
We talked about that before we went live, and I'm just like, oh my God. You know what? I'm kind of torn on that, because you know what? We went to another country and the country refused to let us land. They have every right, technically, to refuse us to land in their country. I mean, you really can't argue that point. I mean, it's a non-issue. But why are we trying to land there? We're trying to bring back people that they don't want the criminals in there any more than we do. So we're trying to bring back, let's just say we're assuming they're criminals. I don't want to, an instant to proven guilty kind of thing. They don't want them back any more than we want to have them. So that's why they wouldn't let them land. But being you in somebody else's house, you got to follow their rules.
100%. I mean, the fact that we didn't coordinate, right? If
Mhm.
we're going to bring a plane into another country, right? I think there's coordination and planning that has to be done, and some diplomacy that's got to be worked on that. So I just thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
So Jim, we've been going about 18 minutes. Time to get into our main subject, the pardon. So I'm going to bring up some screens. So I want to talk about pardons from both presidents. This is not an
Mhm.
attack on any specific political party or anything, but there are some certain pardons that have been made that I want to discuss. The first one is President Biden pardoning his son. So I find that quite interesting
Mhm.
that he pardoned his son. Obviously, he's going to protect his family. I think if we were all in a position like him, we would do the same for our family members. Yes or no?
I would think so. I mean, I'd hate to sit here and say I would do something wrong, but I can't say I'd leave my kid hang out to dry. You know?
It's a tough situation, right?
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, there was concern about weaponization of the DOJ and the DOJ going after Hunter once Biden left office, but I think I'd do the same for my son. Let's be honest, right? You're going to take care of your family.
Yeah.
So I went down. There's been a bunch of people that have been pardoned. Let's talk about this one. All the members of Congress who served on the Select Committee to investigate January 6th attack in the United States Capitol, and the staff. Very
That's
broad and general blanket. What's your take on that, Jim?
well, before it's never been a really hot point of discussion because nobody really questions a presidential pardon. I mean, historically they haven't. It's a courtesy thing that surprisingly nobody comes in and attacks. I don't know. It's the one thing that they don't attack. But I was not really aware because I hadn't really thought about it, and I've done some research since. And thank you, Ed. We're going that direction. My thought on all that is I was not aware, and I've done a little bit of research since then. I found several different fields of thought on this. I didn't realize you could pardon somebody that had not been convicted of an offense. I mean, I've read several things on the matter, and some people say it can, some people say it can't. And there's been, how they like to wordsmith everything together, and it just reads weird. But I mean, part of a pardon is you generally have to have done something wrong. And if their contention this whole time has been, well, we haven't done anything wrong, then how can you issue a pardon, especially if there's no conviction to overturn?
Well, my hope is that we stop going after our opponents and we focus on the real crimes that are being committed.
I agree. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead. Here's warrant number 2.
Yeah.
Dr. Fauci.
What's
your take on the pardon for Dr. Fauci?
Same thing. There's no conviction to overturn. There's no, if he's been so innocent and he's done nothing wrong, why does he need a pardon? Fauci, in my humble opinion, really needs to be tried for crimes against humanity, and he needs to be held accountable. I mean, he destroyed lives, he destroyed livelihoods. I mean, everything that's come out in the last couple of years since then. And you can go on YouTube alone and see, what they talked to him about here versus 2 years later. This is not the case, and here it is. Yes, it is the case. What? You told us back then he needs to be held accountable, and the fact that he gets a preemptive pardon, I think that sends a message the opposite of what the administration wanted to send. And I think it's just dirty pool, because here's the problem with that, and extends beyond just this pardon. It extends just beyond this pardon. I read that too, Ed. Just beyond this pardon is the thing. Nobody ever does anything wrong in government is ever held accountable for what they did. So the next person is like, I can do anything because nobody ever pays for it. Bill Jones.
Yeah, I think we've gone a little far on pardons as far as preemptive pardons. I'm not one to say that that Dr. Fauci actually committed crimes, because I haven't done the research or the history on, the gain of function work being done in China and if he's associated with it. But I thought it should have been pursued, right, in a nonpartisan way and get to the facts, right? How about this one? This one's interesting. General Mark, what's your opinion about the pardon for General Mark Milley?
I'm not really kept up with. I can't really speak to that one. That is one that I'm not real informed on.
Yeah. So when with the January 6th riots, Mark Milley did call China, right, and Russia to let them know, hey, we got it under control. And I think President Trump took that as a, disloyal, and that this is probably a whole conversation itself we could talk about, right? But definitely you want to keep the world stable when things look out of control, right? And obviously this country is in control, but maybe to other countries it might have looked a little out of control when those riots happened on January 6th. So I don't think this was needed. I don't think President Trump says a lot of things, but I don't think he was going to go after General Mark Milley. I think General Mark Milley served honorably in his time as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. That's my personal opinion. People may not agree with me, and that's okay. But I think he was pretty honorable and did a pretty darn good job as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So I think he did the best he could in the situation he was in. I don't think he was being disloyal to the president. I think he was just making sure that the world stayed stable.
Yeah. Bill Jones has got some interesting points down here. The states can and likely will ignore preemptive pardoned individuals. I guess it would depend on the crime. Because if that's a federal level, Kevin, what do you think? That's the federal level is the pardon. Can a state ignore?
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. Right. I can't talk about it. It's a great question. Right. Will the states ignore the preemptive pardons? Great question, Bill. I'm not sure. And Bill, I see what you said about and he did it was by definition treasonous. The question is, was his intent to be treasonous, Bill, or was his intent to keep the world stable? Right. Understand it's probably a debate we could have quite a bit about that, but I think his intent was to make sure the world knew that we were in control, and regardless of what they were seeing on TV screens, right, that don't worry, we got it under control. That's how I take it. And possibly, Bill, I think you probably disagree with that, and that's okay. But that's, it's a tough decision at the time. It's always easy to go back and look and say, I could have probably done that better or differently. And Ed, yep, there were 8,000 pardons under Biden, but let's be honest, President Trump has 4 years. We'll see where the number of pardons end up for President Trump at the end of his second term.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, the only person that come close to that number was Andrew Johnson, and that's because he pardoned soldiers from the Confederate Army.
Yep. All right, and this is the last one that I'm going to cover on President Biden before we get into the Trump pardons, because I haven't forgot about the Trump pardons. We're going to discuss the Trump pardons as well. But he put a blanket pardon on his family members for the last 10 years. And so, have this family committed crimes? I don't know. I think there's enough evidence if it was to be investigated and they were to peel back the onion, they would find the crimes. They'd find crimes. And I don't think it's just the Bidens. I think there's a whole bunch of politicians who are doing stuff that, is crooked and illegal. And we can talk about the myriad number of them. But a pre-pardon of all family members, again, tough, very good point, Ed, that if you didn't commit a crime, you shouldn't need a pardon. But if somebody's coming after you and your family, I can see why somebody could potentially do it. Do I agree with it? No, I absolutely don't agree with it, but it happened. Jim, what do you think?
Well, I find it interesting that it's done now. I mean, Biden has been in politics for half a century and family right along there with him most of the way. So at any point during his tenure as senator, his tenure as vice president to Barack Obama, I mean, when and where, I mean, he could have done this, had this done. I'm sure, when he was vice president, he could have got Barack Obama to do it if it was really that necessary. Why now? Why now? Is he afraid that really that President Trump is going to spend time going after his family members? I don't think that was in Trump's agenda. I can't speak for the man, but I don't think it was in his plans. But to your point, Kevin, protecting the family, but protecting them from what? I mean, what did they do? Do we even know what they did? If they did anything? I mean, you think about it. If you've got the criminal family, you got the guy you see in these TV shows all the time. You got the one guy's doing all the criminal acts. You got his family that's just benefiting off of it. They're not committing crimes. They don't need to because this guy's rich.
Well, it's an interesting thing. And as Bill put back is 2014 in the laptop era of discovery. I agree that it's tied to that, Bill. Again, kind of on the fence on this one. right? You're going to protect your family. Let's be honest, not the only family that is complicit in doing things that probably shouldn't be doing, right? In
Mhm.
politics, right? We could probably, the laundry list is long, very long. All right, let's talk about the Trump pardons and granting commutation sentences for certain personnel and pardoning the rest from the January 6 riots. Let's talk about this, Bill. What's your thoughts on this?
Wow, that's a lot.
So these people were commuted. These people here, because their sentences still stand, but they reduced them, right? They're free and out of prison. And everybody else, which is about 1,500 or so, have been pardoned that were involved with the January 6 riots.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one main ringleader, if you will, that got the maximum sentence at 22 years in prison.
Yep.
What's his name? I had him up earlier.
Yeah, the guy from the Proud Boys, and I forgot his name as well. Yeah, yeah.
Did he get? He got commuted, right? He didn't get.
He
pardoned.
got commuted.
He got commuted. Okay.
So, difference between commutation and full pardon is commutation means that your conviction still stands, but you're released and your sentence ends and you're free to go. Pardon means, it's expunged from your record, right? So there's a difference between the two. And I'm just going to share my opinion on this, right? I'm not good with a blanket. I got serious issues with a blanket pardon. Okay. Big issues, right? Each individual should have been looked at, right? Each case should have been looked at, and a decision on each individual case should have been weighed, right? I am not for a blanket pardon. That was a bad day in our history. We can probably get into a conversation of how that started and who's responsible, and I really don't want to go there, right? But there are rules for entering the Capitol. Anybody who goes and visited Washington, D.C., I live in the D.C. area, right? There's a process you got to go through, right, to get into the Capitol. And there's a lot of people that violated that process. So are there crimes? Are there sentences commensurate with the crime they committed? I don't know. I'm not, number one, I'm not a lawyer. Number two, I don't know what everybody's sentence is, but they should have been looked at, individually assessed. Amen, Bill.
Yeah.
Individually assessed and by merit.
Yep. I agree.
Right. I really have heartburn with this. This is a stain on the American justice system and is a slap in the face to law enforcement and there's a lot of discussions of, well, when cities were being rioted, that nobody did anything. So now it's in the Capitol. All of a sudden people care. That doesn't matter. It's a violation of our democratic processes that went on January 6th. How about the two police officers that were convicted and pardoned by Trump for the killing a young black man? They chased him. They covered up. They distorted the evidence, and he pardoned them. What's your take on that, Jim?
Well, anytime a police officer, I don't even care about race at this point. Anytime a police officer does anything such as that, covers evidence, fabricates evidence, acts unprofessionally, and violates the rights of another, should pay the penalty. I don't know that should have been a pardonable. I think that was overreach. Way
overreach. I do not think that those two police officers should have been pardoned, and I think it's ironically the police unions are abhorrent on the pardons for the January 6 rioters, but they are in favor of the pardons for these two officers.
Well,
when there's clearly they tried to cover it up, right?
Well, an organization like that, and I've got no problem with police officers. I'm not one of those guys that hates cops just because they're cops. Like any other group of people, there are some bad, seeds among them. That's just a fact of life. But it's just it not only like you said, stains our justice system, but it stains the cops that are out there doing the right thing. But organizations like that a lot of times protect their own blindly. And I mean, loyalty, I'm a big one for loyalty, but blindly, I don't know. But then you hear all the time about, you're with, your partner, you see him steal $100 from a crime scene, and then you turn him in and then nobody wants to work with you. You're blacklisted. I'm like, I mean, I don't know how true that is, but I can imagine it would be. But it's like, so what is the right thing to do? Let him get by with that? It's not the right thing to do, but then what is? But to cover that kind of thing up, I mean, if the conviction was looked at objectively and they were found guilty of doing that, especially being cops, they're going to be given more favorable terms when they're being looked at than just you and I would be. So if they were found guilty and convicted, I think they should, at most, still, I was going to say commuted, but I don't even think so. I don't even think that.
So in general, right, there have been pardons through the years from presidents, right? But I think we have taken the pardons to a whole new level in between President Biden and President Trump, right? And here's my concern. My concern is, right, this is a tool granted to the president to give, pardons and commutations to people. And I think we're abusing it now. And I'm concerned about where that may go in the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen at the end of President Trump's term? Is he going to pre-pardon, right? Preemptively pardon a whole bunch of people, including himself, before he walks out the door? I don't know.
I was reading some on that, and it's like a pardon extends to everything except presidential crimes or something like that. Read something like that. I was reading that earlier before we went live. Just because somebody had played with that notion on his last presidency that he would pardon himself. And I don't know that you can really do that. The way I've read that you really can't. But it's kind of like a judge going out and killing somebody and saying, you know what, case dismissed. But if you look at some of the numbers, Barack Obama only pardoned 1,927. Biden quadrupled that
in 4 years.
Yeah, in half the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, before that, you look at George W. Bush, 200. Bill Clinton, 459. George H.W. Bush, 77. I mean, to your point, we've really taken these pardons to a whole new level, and there's some pardons I think need to be issued that haven't been. And I don't think this subject is far from done. And again,
and I think we'd be interested in the people listening, what their comments are about pardons and how they feel. I mean, please, people, put stuff in the chat. Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to respond to your thoughts. And we'd also love to have people as guests on this show. So if you're interested, reach out to Jim and I and let us know if you'd like to appear on the show. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is a tough thing, right? Again, it should be used for the right reasons. It should be used sparingly. It should be used after a thorough review of a case is done, right? In my opinion, right? That's what I think. I think
in my opinion, when a great injustice has been done, not just when you commit a crime and you don't like that, they got charged with it. I mean, and definitely not for personal use. I'm going to protect my family just because, the next guy may go after him. It's just, it's just too much power, really. Excuse me.
Well, Jim, we still got quite a few time left, and there have been, what about, Bill's got something here. He said, what about the many stories of death rowers and DNA acquittals? Those are deserving of pardon. 100%, Bill. There are, and probably setting up a team or a commission to go through those type of things so that by the time they get to the president's desk for approval, right, they've been vetted. That's probably a much, much better way to approach the situation, potentially. Bill, I'm interested to know your thoughts on that. Would you agree that there should be an office or a commission that looks at these things and sends them to the president for review?
Waiting on Bill.
So, while we're waiting, hey, one of the things is so some of the president's nominees have been approved for office, right? And it's interesting. Some of these have gone quite well. Marco Rubio for Department of State.
Yep.
I think that's a real good pick, and I think he's going to do good things as the Secretary of State, right? So, how about your thoughts on Hegseth for Department of Defense, Jim?
That really went down to the wire, didn't it? Vance had to actually get in there and approve that. I'm not real familiar with the man, but I mean, he seems properly vetted, and he seems controversial just to the fact that the decision was so split. So I look forward to seeing what he's going to do as Secretary of Defense. I mean, that should be interesting.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of things in the that got released during his hearings and prior to him, going in front of Congress, and those are interesting details. I think he handled them well when he went through the congressional hearings or the senator hearings. However, I'll tell you, from somebody who worked at the Pentagon for 10 years, I definitely think we need a clean house at the DoD. I'm hoping that he's going to be that guy. And there's a lot of questions on whether, he's qualified or not, right? Because we've had past couple have been retired generals. There have been Secretary of Defenses that have not served as generals who have been appointed. It's a political position, so I don't think being a 4-star general is necessarily a requirement to be the Department of Defense head. What do you think about that, Jim? Do you think we need somebody with that level of experience to be the Secretary of Defense?
I've had debates with that with different people over the years, and I go back and forth because I remember when I was in, and I would be put in a position over folks, and I said, well, I don't know anything about what they do. It's like, you don't need to know what they do. That's why you have your subject matter experts. You just need to lead them to do the right thing. And I never wholly agreed with that. If you're going to be in charge of something military, I think you should have some exposure to it, even if you were a contractor or a DoD employee. Something. But again, you have your subject matter experts, you have your counsels, you have your other people you can pull from. So, it's hard to say. Like I said, I go back and forth on it. I can see both arguments. I really, if I had to say, if you nail me down to a choice, I'd say yes. I would prefer that he had government or military service.
Yeah. How about Chuck Hagel? He was Secretary of Defense. He was an infantry squad leader in Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
He didn't rise to the rank of 4-star, but he was Secretary of Defense for, I think, 2 years. Yeah, for 2 years. Like so, yep. And so I think it's taken. I think we got to clean up the DoD, and I think Marion, it's a great question, Marion.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, Marion.
I'm not prepared to talk about the DEI topic. I'm not prepared to talk about it. It's not that I don't want to talk about it. I'm just not prepared to talk about it. It's a great question, though. And the EELC, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is, Marion. So I apologize. I don't recognize that acronym. But Chuck Hagel, I thought he did a pretty good job as Secretary of Defense. So I definitely want to see the DoD cleaned up, right? I definitely want to see a cleanup of the DoD. I say this about the Pentagon, and I may have said this last week. In the Pentagon, there's important people that work at Pentagon, and they're important. They really are. But there's a lot of people work at the Pentagon, Jim, that think they're important, and they're not, right?
I agree. I'm sure.
There's a lot of people there that fit that category. And I'm not going to mention anybody by name, but definitely it's a who's who club in the five-sided building.
Oh, Congress and all that. Just it's all good old boys club. It just especially if you've got, and I think this could be a whole other future segment, especially if you've got people in there that have no term limits.
Yes, term limits. That can be a whole nother subject.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Interesting.
But I think Marion has a good point. But like if you're not prepared to discuss it, I'm not prepared to discuss it. But we could do a future episode on it.
Yes, I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not prepared to speak to it because I haven't done enough research to understand. I know that he's eliminated those offices in the federal government. I'm not sure of the impacts of them, and I think it's a wait and see. I think we need to wait a little bit and see how things pan out.
The one thing I will say is we've gone 250 years in federal government without a DEI office.
Yep.
So
I just saw Collins comment, and I was not tracking that. He said there's currently only 3 federal death row inmates, and says president cannot pardon any death row inmates in state prisons. Was not tracking that. That's interesting.
He cannot pardon death row inmates in states. I was not aware of that.
I was not aware of that either.
Okay.
Something we'll have to take a look at, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Colin.
So I'm interested, though, for the people that are still listening, right? What's your opinion about where we've gone with pardons? Do you think we've crossed the line? Do you think we've gone too far with pardons with the ex-president or the former president and the current president? Interested to know your thoughts on that. And where do you think the line is with pardons? Right? Do you think hey, it's exclusively the president's say, and he or she should be able to pardon whoever they feel, or do you feel there should be vetting that's done to get people pardoned?
Kevin, I'll go you one better. Are there any people that you can think of, obviously they'd be more high profile, that you think should be pardoned in all this and haven't been? Because I mean, I can't think of her name, but I can think of one young lady that I think should be pardoned if she hasn't already. I haven't looked her up in a while. Do you remember a young lady? Can't remember her name. She was a victim of sex trafficking for years, and when she escaped by killing her captor, and she was sent to prison. Can't remember her name for the life of me. But if she's not already free, I believe a pardon should be tossed her direction. Like, dude, she killed the guy that was sex trafficking her to escape. I mean, come on. That's the kind of thing, in my opinion, that needs to be looked at, before, a lot of these others. And I'm sure there's others, that's just the first one that comes to mind. Had I knew I was going to bring it up, I'd have researched and I'd know her name, but I apologize for that. Probably be easy enough to find.
It's all good. And I did look up, Colin's 100% right. The president cannot pardon a state criminal offense. Very interesting.
Well, I guess that goes back to kind of what we touched on last week, Kevin, about the sovereignty of the state.
Yes. Where's the line live between the federal government and the state's authority? That's a great conversation.
I mean, the general subject remains the same, even if it's not done at the federal level. Then it needs to be mandated to be done at the state level, because not only are your death row inmates sitting there for 20, 30 years dying a natural death when they've been convicted and sentenced to death, but the ones that are in the center sitting there 20, 30 years waiting to get out and live a life that they've been denied.
And we got a comment from Ed. Ed said, hey, there should be a limit of pardons that a president can issue, and only at the end of their term. Great point. Great perspective, Ed. I'm not going to say I agree or disagree with that. I haven't had enough time to think about that, but that's a good point. So thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, there's I was looking at Biden's pardons. 6,500 of those pardons were for marijuana possession. Okay, I got to give him that one because we have decriminalized marijuana in so many states, and even to a degree on the federal level. They're nonviolent crimes. You know, in many cases, you see these people getting more years in jail for marijuana possession than for violent crimes. So
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'll have
Yep.
to give him that one.
100%. 100%. I'll go with that. So, hey, just a reminder, everybody out there, if you want to be a guest on our podcast, we'd love to have you on here. If you reach out to Jim or I, we'll interview you. We'll talk to you, understand, that'll be the subject, whatever subject is burning that you want to talk about. And we will definitely consider it. We'd love to have guests on here. And Marion writes, vetting 100%. Yep. I agree with Marion. I think Jim and I agree with that, right? Vetting should be 100% for pardons, right? It shouldn't just be a blanket. Very frustrating because we've opened up Pandora's box and we don't know where it's going to go now in the future. Not with just President Trump, but any future presidents, right? That serve. So great point.
But yeah, compared to the other presidents, it does need to be reined in. It does need to be reined in. And as far as the blankets, I mean, probably 99 out of 100, you're not going to have a problem with. But like we were talking about immigration, if you have 100 and you have one violent one, that's one too many. It's just one too many. So you got to properly vet everyone. And if you vet everyone the same way, it's fair. At least that's the theory. You hope it works out that way, but I mean,
yep.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, I think we've reached the crescendo of our subject on pardons. I think we got a lot of people agreeing about blanket pardons are not the way to go. I think people agree that they should be vetted, right? They should be limited, right? There should be a time frame when they can do them. And I think it's been a great conversation. Any closing thoughts, Jim?
No, it's just we're just trying to get people thinking, get people asking the tough questions. I mean, too many people out there just take it as it comes, and
absolutely,
we got to talk. We got to talk,
and we got to be able to talk about the things that we disagree with as well, right? That's the whole purpose of us standing up this channel. Is we may not agree. You and I don't agree on a lot of things, Jim. There's a lot of things you and I don't agree with, right? Yeah, the Ohio State, right? The only university I know has "the" in it. But that's okay. That's why we Marion put the name in the
Crystal Kaiser. Is that her?
So we want to have conversations with folks, right? We want to have the conversations. We want to be able to discuss stuff that is controversial, but not attack, right? We want to talk it out and hear people's views, right? We don't expect people to agree with us. And we don't want to agree. We want to learn and grow from these experiences.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Right. Yep. Marion got it.
Thank you, Marion.
So Jim, with that, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jim.
And we are
the Signal Brothers.
Have a great day, folks.